if I already know what the expected outcomes are, by definition, because they are expected, there's nothing new.
Right.
If I can already expect something, it's because it's nothing new.
Right.
And I'm not here to waste my time doing something that we already know. I'm here to bring something new, and to be really new, it needs to be unexpected. I cannot anticipate it. I can only approach with this not knowing and allow this space to be filled by the things that really needs to arise in that container. And they cannot arise unless the space is given.
I'd love it if you could share whatever rises up in you that you have learned from the plants about plant consciousness through your research. So could you share some of the real, oh my God, epiphany moments where you were taught things by the plants that showed you that they are definitely not just the kind of numb little creatures that grow out of the ground and don't have thoughts or consciousness that most people tend to think that they are?
Well, I guess...
in other words, tell us, how conscious are they really? And how did you figure it out?
Well, I guess I can share how one of my experiments came about, because it's the one that for me was the most... in a way, challenging, transformational. It also demanded of me to be really open to everything and all possibilities. So I was in Peru, and I was doing a dieta with a plant that actually is about the mind. And during the dieta, one day, I never really keep a diary except when I travel. I don't know why. So when I travel, I diary every day, pages and pages. When I'm at home, although lots of stuff happens all the time, I don't diary. Anyway, so I have my travel diary, and all of my dieta are actually, when I do a dieta, I do write down. And so all my entire dieta phase was in this booklet. Actually, I got one here. Oh, you can't see because we are only on voice, but they're all these red little books.
Yeah.
And anyway,
they look like moleskin books.
They are actually, they're little red moleskin, and I got a pile of them because of all the work that has happened. And so I'm scribbling in my little red book, and at one point I felt I'm in the midst of my dieta, so I'm in isolation. I'm just basically deeply in communion with this space where the plant is, and at one point I felt like as if someone else was dictating, and I was just taking down notes of someone else's speaking. And it wasn't just speaking, but it was actually, draw this diagram like this and do it like that. And so my diary is full of these diagrams and these, this is how many times you need to do that. And then you move that to that, and instructions. And when I finished and that moment closed itself, I looked at what was left in my pages and I was like, what's this? And then one more little thing came through, and it was like, and by the way, not sunflowers, peas. And I was like, what? So now what happened was that a couple of years before I went to do this dieta, I was trying to do an experiment in the lab with sunflower seeds and seedlings. And I was hoping to see whether I could, test whether these plants could respond to conditioning, talking about entrainment, to conditioning, a little bit like the same experiments that Pavlov did with the dog.
Yes.
And in the Pavlovian experiment with the dog, the famous story goes that Pavlov rings the bell and then he offers the dog dinner, and then he does it repeatedly. And then after a while, the bell doesn't mean anything to start with, but after a while, the dog learns that whenever the bell goes, the dinner is about to follow. And so he starts salivating, even if dinner is nowhere to be seen.
Right.
So the bell itself has acquired a meaning, and he induces the dog to connect that sound to what he wants, dinner. Now, so what the plants had given me, what these plants had given me during the dieta was the design to test for Pavlovian learning. And so when I went back home after Peru, and I had these pages, and they were just haunting me. It was like, I have to try it. I know it sounds crazy, but I have to try it. I have to try it. So I booked the lab space, and I set it up as the plants asked, and I fiddled around a little bit. And then I started running the experiment. And one thing, like, wouldn't it be nice if the story goes that, like, you run the experiment, it works, amazing, success. And instead, I ran the experiment, and 2 weeks in, and this was a very demanding experiment because it was done in the dark, it was done in the cold, and it was done at horror hours. I had to be there every morning by 6 o'clock, and it would be a long day to follow these plants and make sure that everything was switching on and off at the right time. And anyway, 2 weeks in, and I realized that it looked like it wasn't working. So it was like, because the study itself was so demanding as well of my time and my energy, I thought, you're an idiot. You thought that the plant, you went to Peru, you thought that the plant gave you the way of doing this experiment, and how romantic. And then you come back and you actually follow through, how romantic. And then it doesn't work. So I was like, I was, of course, a little bit disappointed, but in the fact that it's like, it would have been nice if it worked. What a beautiful story. But then science is also demanding, like, okay, it didn't work. And maybe the plants cannot do. That's it. And that's the result. It's like, okay, I tested it. It doesn't work. End of the story. So I had decided, and it happened, and this is also described in the book, I had decided that I was going to go in on a Sunday and just clear up the space, close down the lab, switch on all the lights, turn everything off. And so I went in, and a voice inside me said, like, just give it another look, check one more time. And I was like, why? We already decided that it's not working. And so I peeped into this setup, and the only light, this is, again, it's all in the dark, and the only light that it's on is this little blue light, which is what I used as an alternative to dinner in the context of the Pavlovian learning. So the blue light was the dinner for my plant, and instead of the bell, I had a little fan. So I'm looking in, and there is this little blue light on, and the little plant at the bottom. And then suddenly I saw it, and it was like, they're doing it. They've been doing it all along, and I just could not see it. My training was in the middle between me and my seeing, to the point that, like, I've been trained to expect things to happen in a particular way. And because of that, I cannot see when they are happening, just they're happening slightly different than what I expected.
Right.
And so I'm in this lab, and suddenly I'm seeing the plants, actually, they have been doing exactly what I was testing for. And I was about to dismantle everything and never find out that they actually could have done exactly what I was testing for, but I couldn't see it. And that little moment, that is one of those moments that feels like it could have been hours and it could have been seconds, who knows? But it was like, oh my God. And I remember crying. It was just like, I was so overwhelmed by, like, oh my God, the plant gave me the instructions. I followed through. I followed through to the point of having to meet the real obstacle to this. It wasn't the plants. It wasn't the instruction was wrong. It was my own conditioning, and in this case, my own professional training, and having to, bump against it, crack through, and see that on the other side, actually, everything was just working perfectly fine. And so then, of course, after that moment, what followed was like months of actual, okay, now I know there is something here. And so repeat, try this other control, repeat. And then, and then is the science. And then is the beautiful scientific approach at its best. It's a method. It approaches the question. Its own way of setting the rules and the boundaries so that you can actually say something and the data can speak. And so in that sense, this for me was the most beautiful moment for my career up to this moment, because it really showed me how these two bodies of knowing are absolutely not in opposition. If anything, they complement each other perfectly, and they can blend into each other. And what it means is the science doesn't have to be done just by the human scientists, but it can be done in collaboration with others. In this case, if I work with plants, I can collaborate with plants. And so my science after that, and actually I just finished writing this paper and it should be coming out soon. It's about an experiment that apparently failed. But yet it was because the failure was because I wasn't listening to the collaboration that was called in for. And the collaboration was between me, the plants that were involved in the experiments, and even the space, the materials and the space that contained us as the experiment. And so, and in that moment, I really learned to let go of my need to have to know in advance.
Right.
And having this expected outcome, which is what, we are all kind of used to, because everything is about, we write a grant and it's like, what are the expected outcomes of this project? Or we do anything, a business, and it's like, what are the expected outcomes from this business to be called successful? And instead, what I'm learning is that if I already know what the expected outcomes are, by definition, because they are expected, there's nothing new.
Right.
If I can already expect something, it's because it's nothing new.
Right.
And I'm not here to waste my time doing something that we already know. I'm here to bring something new. And to be really new, it needs to be unexpected. I cannot anticipate it. I can only approach with this not knowing and allow this space to be filled by the things that really needs to arise in that container. And they cannot arise unless the space is given. And so in a way, this has changed a lot my science, obviously. And I'm not sure there is really a space in current academia for this kind of science. But talking about, when you mentioned before, a more conscious science, I think for me, this is my way of trying to get there.